November is just around the corner, and that means the 16th Annual National Podcast Post Month is fast approaching. Hi, I'm Jennifer Navarrete, founder of NaPodPomo, and I'm inviting you to join the 30-day Global Podcasting Challenge. Whether you're a newbie looking to start your first podcast or a seasoned pro seeking inspiration, NaPodPomo is the perfect place to experiment and try new things. Visit napodpomo.org to learn more. See where podcasting can take you this November during National Podcast Post Month.
Yes, well, a couple of things. I was keeping a journal in the hospital. A friend of mine dropped off a little spiral notebook, and I think she meant for me to write down doctor's notes or instructions for the kids or something. What it ended up being was when I would get woken up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't go back to sleep, I just started, journaling and basically just pouring out all my angst into that journal. And my thought was, when this is all over and when I look back on this and it's just a memory, I'm going to burn that journal and I'm going to feel so good about it because it'll be over. And we hit a period of time in there where I was just kind of barely hanging on. I was wearing a life vest, which is an external defibrillator vest with a battery pack. And I wore that for 9 months. And I was just barely hanging on. Every time I'd go to the doctor, I was just barely hanging on. And I just hit this period of time where it just felt like nothing was happening. So I started to, just ignore all of that writing that I'd done. And my husband said, "Are you still writing all this down?" And I said, "No, I don't ever want to relive this part of my life. I'm not writing it down." And he said, "You should be."
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have yet another amazing author on my screen as we record. And I just love learning from people and hearing their story and how they became an author and the contents of their book. And we can go on and on and on. And today, Lori-Ann Wood's on with us today. We're going to be talking about her book, Divine Detour. And there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be chatting about. And I'm so happy to have her here. Lori-Ann, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Let everybody know where you are in our big world.
I am in Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, which is the home of Walmart for most people. And we've been here for 32 years. So I didn't start here, but this is where I landed and raised 3 kids here. So it's kind of home now.
Nice. Does everybody in town get like an employee discount at all? Or?
Only the people that work for Walmart, which is frustrating for those of us who don't work for Walmart. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, being the hometown, you'd think there'd be something really special for everyone, but that's great. It sounds like a beautiful place to live as well.
It is. And we do enjoy many benefits from having Walmart here. They do a lot of investment in the community, so can't complain about that.
Good. Tell us a little bit about your family too.
Yeah. So I have 3 grown children and 1 son-in-law and a brand new granddaughter. I know I get the grandchild thing now. You don't know until you know, but when you know, it's good stuff.
Right. It's exciting. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's another whole chapter.
It is. It's a whole new world.
And hence the name of my show, Living the Next Chapter. You're living it right now. So there we go. Right. Nice shameless plug I just got in there. So that was good. Tell us about your book, your journey as becoming an author. Go back before there was any book in the works. Mm-hmm. If somebody came up to you in Bentonville and said, "Hey, Lori-Ann, you're going to be an author one day," what would you have said to them?
Yeah. I would have maybe agreed with them on one slight. I think a lot of people are like this. They feel like they have a book inside them, but I was waiting to be an expert in something. And I couldn't imagine what that book was going to be about. It was just kind of this, some people want to climb a mountain or run a marathon, or I thought that'd be cool to write a book, but I was waiting until I felt like I knew enough about something that I could impart some wisdom, and thought at the time, maybe I'll write a book about how to vacation on the cheap, or maybe how to throw a really great children's party. But I never took the time or any preparation to do it. I was busy living my life, doing all the things, and then something caught my attention, and that all changed. So that's how the book came about.
Okay, so what caught your attention? Let's go there. Come on, talk about that.
Yeah. It was about 8 years ago. Let me just say this. I got an evaluation for a life insurance policy, and they told me that I had less than 3% chance of ever developing heart disease in my lifetime because I had low blood pressure and low cholesterol and all the good numbers, which I've always been a really healthy person. I was never in the hospital other than to have a baby, and I wasn't on any medication, and I was just living life. And then 3 weeks after that medical evaluation for the life insurance, I wasn't feeling well. And I thought, I think I might have the flu, because it was Thanksgiving week and my kids were coming home. I still had kids at home and some were coming from college. And I thought, I got to get to the doctor and get this resolved so I can have Thanksgiving at my house. And I went to convenient care a couple of times that week, and they gave me an inhaler, and then they gave me an antibiotic. And I just kind of went downhill that week. And by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I pretty much was in bed because I just didn't have the energy to get out of bed, which was really strange for me. And at that point, I thought, I bet I have pneumonia, because I'd never had that, but I just was wiped out. And I spent the whole Thanksgiving in bed. But then on Black Friday, we woke up and my husband got up early and called our primary care doctor and insisted that I go in. And when I went in, the first thing he said to me after listening to my chest with a stethoscope, he said, "If we're lucky, it's pneumonia." And I was thinking that was my worst case. I was thinking ahead to what's the worst this could be. And he took me to the x-ray lab and did a chest x-ray, and he found that I had an extremely enlarged heart, and he direct admitted me into the hospital. He would not let me go home to pack a bag. And I spent 2 weeks in cardiac ICU. And on day one of being there, they diagnosed me with end-stage heart failure, and my heart was functioning at just 6%.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was crazy. It was so, like, if I had made a list of everything that I was worried about ever happening in my lifetime, I mean, cancer would have been on there, car wreck, but heart disease wouldn't have even been on the list.
Wow. So, okay, how does the family respond when we hear that kind of news? Like,
yeah,
what happens?
we were kind of in a bubble, because that whole time, even when I saw that printed on my admission form for cardiac ICU, I was still thinking that they're going to fix this and I'm going to go home and I'm going to go back to my life. And I think we all kind of thought that for a long time, because I really didn't feel that bad, to be honest with you. I was tired and I was out of energy, but I wasn't in any kind of pain. I wasn't, I was still walking around the hospital hallways slowly, but I was walking around, and it just didn't seem like I was in the shape that they were telling me I was in. But we kind of got a few clues, because the crash cart, the defibrillator cart, followed me around the hospital. And I wanted to take a shower, because when I went in that Black Friday, I was just going to run in and get a prescription or a steroid shot. And then I was going to go Black Friday shopping. So I had not taken a shower, and there I was in ICU for 2 weeks, and they would not let me take a shower because I could not be off the machines that long to take a shower.
Wow.
I argued with them that I could, but they would not let me do it. And it kind of slowly sunk in. My kids were here, and then, when Thanksgiving weekend ended, they went back to college or back to school, and they kind of had to go back to their lives. And I think in the back of their minds, they were thinking this is all going to resolve as well. But we've slowly learned over, those years, the ups and downs that heart failure brings, that it's really a chronic progressive disease. And it only goes in one direction, and it gets worse. They prop you up with medications and devices and lifestyle changes, but the only cure is a heart transplant. And because I'm a very high functioning heart failure patient, I'm not a candidate for that at this point. So that's kind of where we are.
Wow. From talk about being blindsided and not having any time to prepare mentally and, do all that. You just going in, I'm just going to do a quick test and I'll be on my way. Life can turn a corner so quickly.
So fast.
And, it must have been quite nerve-wracking to be there and hear the news. And I think, I've been in the hospital before, and you get bad news and everybody's busy around you, and you kind of feel like the room is getting really small, very slowly, and you're like, uh-oh, this isn't feeling good at all.
Yeah.
Just when you see concern on doctors' and nurses' faces for your sake, you start to go, oh, this is really serious.
Right.
This isn't something that's just a cold or a sprained ankle. This is something really serious. When there's this many people around me and I'm hooked up to all these things, I need to pay attention to this. So, yeah.
For sure.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the things I remember not feeling that bad, but I also remember the cardiac nurse practitioner came in, and I was laying there in the bed, and she grabbed my ankle through the sheets, and I didn't know her, and I thought that was a weird thing for her to do, but she grabbed my ankle and she said, "I'm about to pull the rug out from under you." And even still, there was just this, I don't know what it was inside me that I thought, I know she thinks that is this bad, but I don't. Until it was a couple days later, as I'm still in ICU, the cardiologist I had at the time was kind of, I was getting that sense like you were talking about, where whenever the nurses would change shifts, and I'd get new nurses, and they would all come in with tears in their eyes. And I'm like, I'm okay. Or they would come in and say, I've added you, or my mom's added you to the prayer list at her church. And I didn't know these people. And so I got this sense that they thought it was serious, and that my nurse practitioner thought it was serious. But it was when my cardiologist was looking at the screens, when he would come in, he'd look at all the monitors, and my husband was just desperate for information, and we weren't getting very much. Yeah. And finally my husband said, look, if basically what he was trying to say was, if you don't know what you're doing here, we're going to go to a bigger hospital. And my youngest daughter was in the room. She was in high school, and the doctor said, I'm not messing around here. If things don't turn around, we're looking at a heart transplant. And, 2 days into this, no one had ever said those words to me.
Wow.
I had no idea what he was talking about. So that was hard for my daughter, because she was, she's still at home. She went through the hardest part of it with me. She was a senior in high school, and that whole first year, when I wanted to be doing all the things with her as a senior and going to college visits and all of that, she was going through all of this with me. And we were making trips to Cleveland Clinic every couple of months. And that's kind of how that defined her senior year. But I wouldn't pick that for her. But it also, we have this understanding now that the other children that weren't so intimately involved in it don't really understand. She gets it.
Mm. So, okay, so how does the book come to light through all of this? And how does the book kind of become the next, well, again, here we go, the next chapter for you as you kind of live through this together with your family? When does the idea of the book actually come to light for you? Yes.
Well, a couple of things. I was keeping a journal in the hospital. A friend of mine dropped off a little spiral notebook, and I think she meant for me to write down doctor's notes or instructions for the kids or something. What it ended up being was when I would get woken up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't go back to sleep, I just started, journaling and basically just pouring out all my angst into that journal. And my thought was, when this is all over and when I look back on this and it's just a memory, I'm going to burn that journal and I'm going to feel so good about it because it'll be over.
Yeah.
And we hit a period of time in there where I was just kind of barely hanging on. I was wearing a life vest, which is an external defibrillator vest with a battery pack. And I wore that for 9 months. And I was just barely hanging on. Every time I'd go to the doctor, I was just barely hanging on. And I just hit this period of time where it just felt like nothing was happening. So I started to, just ignore all of that writing that I'd done. And my husband said, "Are you still writing all this down?" And I said, "No, I don't ever want to relive this part of my life. I'm not writing it down." And he said, "You should be." And so I kind of started to write a little bit down and started to dabble into some life questions as I'm processing what's going on and sharing it a little bit on a blog that I was doing to keep people up to date with my health. And those kind of grew into some articles that I wrote online and for some publications. And then at some point I realized, I had taught college business classes for 25 years. And I figured out at some point that I'm not going to be able to do that again because I can't stand up and speak for hours at a time. I just don't have the breath support or the stamina. Even when I do presentations now, I'm sitting down. And so I knew that wasn't part of what I was going to be doing. And at that point, I started, thinking about what if all the stuff that I've been writing is the book that I was supposed to write. And at first it dawned on me that I'm going to write this medical memoir about what happened, because there was a lot of ups and downs in there where I thought I was healed at one point and completely restored and came back down. And there was just a lot in that story that was interesting to me and my family.
Yeah.
But I realized it probably wasn't that interesting to anybody else. And it wasn't that unusual because everybody has, a medical story. And so as I processed it more and more and looked back at those journal notes that I took and against my wishes, I still wrote them down. I realized that the real story was these questions I was asking. And I think they're questions that they nag at the back of our mind, all the time. But when we get thrown off on a detour in life, like mine's a medical health detour, but it might be a divorce that you didn't see coming, or loss of a child, or lose your career. And those questions, when you're thrown off onto that, those questions demand to be addressed, because then life has to have those parameters around it. And so I knew that those three questions were something that were bigger than the medical story. And so that's how the book took shape, because I was able to, while I couldn't lecture anymore and do all the things that I had done in that part of my life, I found that I could sit down and type all day long. I had the energy for that. And so this book began to take shape that I never would have taken the time to write in a safer, healthier life. I just would have gone on with what I was doing and plowed through, and it never would have been.
So I am super curious around these questions, and we talked that questions seem to be a sign of weakness to some people as they kind of work through these things. But I don't think if you and I completed the episode now and said goodbye, there would be a lot of upset listeners going, I need to know these questions. Can you kind of unpack a little bit about these questions that help form your book?
Yes, they're 3 questions that I don't know if this is the reverse, because this is a first book I've ever written, but what was coming out of my mind and my angst and my experience, that content came out first. And then once I looked at the content, I realized it was going into kind of 3 main buckets. And those buckets were these questions that I later realized were very reflective of the 3 temptations that Jesus faced in the desert.
Okay.
And so the questions were inspired by those temptations. But the first one I call the question of worry. And that is this life all there is? I think that's just a basic human question, because it reframes how we make choices every day. It informs everything we do, whether we believe this life is all there is. And so in this section of the book, I have 13 essays about loss and fear and regret and things like that. And I should note that in all of the essays, I don't so much come to this pointed solution or the answer to the question. And because that was never really my aim, it was really to say, it's okay to ask the questions. Here's your permission to explore this question. And you really need to. And you really need to for yourself. So that first question, is life all there is, was one I think we all are going to face at some time or another. And when you get on that detour, and it's a serious detour, that one pops up pretty fast. But the second question is what I call the question of doubt. And that question is God always good? Because I think if you Googled or researched in any way, what are the top faith questions, or what are the biggest faith questions, that one's going to make the list every time, right? We've been through COVID. We're seeing war. We're seeing terrible things happening. Is God always good? And when you're on a personal detour, you ask that same question. And so those essays in the second part of the book look at things like protection and vulnerability and resilience, and what's our role in that. So that gives people permission to ask that question. And, we have to ask it. And we're not, there's no harm in asking that question, is God always good? In fact, it's really helpful too. So, and then the third question is what I called the question of control. And personally, this was my hardest question, because I'm a planner and I think a lot of people can relate to this about, being intentional and being someone who has a vision for something that's coming up in the future. And so this question I framed as, is God's plan enough? Is his plan enough? Or what's my role in that? Do I have any say? Can I tweak it? Can I change his mind? And so I looked at things in these essays like disappointment and failure and waiting. And what does that tell me about God's plan? And so those are the sections of the book. And I tried to, take a story from my life, either when I was a child or as I'm raising my children or something current day, and relate that to what was happening with that little bit of a journal entry. Because I think what I decided, and I think it's been pretty effective, is that nobody wanted the straight medical story from beginning to end. But when I could just carve out that little bit of journal entry when it was real and raw, and I was really being honest, and I can share a little bit of that, then the reader can connect to that and say, I was there, I've been there, I've thought that. But then I also gave it a little bit of perspective because the years have gone by and I'm able to look back at it, and that wound is kind of healed over a little bit, and I have a little bit more perspective. And so that, I think, was the combination that has helped it resonate with people that don't have anything to do with heart failure or health.
Right. Wow. So as you go through writing the book, how did it feel then to get the book back into your hands as a completed copy? It's done. You can hold it, and all of those memories from all your entire journey is captured in one book between two covers. What does that feel like to hold on to that for the first time?
My first thought, I think, was I'd always heard people talk about, birthing a book, like it's like having a baby or being a mother, a book mama, and I was like, I don't know, if it's that big a deal, because I've got 3 kids and now I've got a grandchild, but I'll tell you, that's a pretty accurate description, because it was kind of painful. It was painful. It was a long time coming. It was kind of a painful process. And then when you get it, none of that mattered. And it's just beautiful because it's yours. But the other sense that I got that makes it so much like being a parent is that at that point, I knew that I had something to do with the book, but I also knew that it was going to live a life separate from me. I was giving it its beginning, and then it was going to go where it was going to go. And I felt that throughout this whole process, because there's just been some things happen that didn't really have that much to do with me. I was there at the beginning, and I did what I could for the book, but it kind of did some of this and took off and became its own thing.
So there's going to be people listening to our conversation, and they're part of your community. They were there with you, cheering you on, praying for you, supporting you and your family through all of this. And they're listening to this as a supporter of you, and they know you well. What would you say to your community and thanking them for their support and being there for you and your family through all of this?
There has been, I don't know that I would have made it through as a whole person. And I don't mean physically. I had the best medical care in the world, really. And I was blessed to have access to that. But I would not have made it through emotionally and spiritually without people, because from the very beginning, I had people praying for me around the clock, and I still have the prayer chain in a frame that people would set the timer on their phone to get up and pray for me. And some of them are still praying for me all these years later. But that was something that at first was a burden to me, because I wasn't getting well, and I felt bad for them. I was like, I wonder if it's me. I wonder if I'm the reason that their prayers aren't being answered for me. Wow. And I kind of avoided people a little bit because I didn't want to let them down. But I can look back on it now and say that those prayers that they were praying and the words that they were sending me in cards, and people were sending me songs and books, though all of those words were the words that I didn't have for myself at that time. And they formed this safety net for me that really allowed me to survive that time and come out intact. And so if I wouldn't have had that support, I might be alive because of the medication and all the other things that I've had access to, but I wouldn't be the whole person that I am. And the words that they gave me were the words I needed when I didn't have my own.
It's powerful. It's powerful. And then my thoughts go to your husband as well through all of this. Mm-hmm. I'm married, and I've been married for 30 years with my wife, and I can't imagine how gut-wrenching it is to go through that and to not be able to fix it. I would love to fix it in that situation and make your situation better. And I can just imagine his desire to do whatever possible to help you, but then to be so helpless at the same time. Talk about your relationship through that and how maybe things are a little different for the two of you now that you're on this side.
Yeah, it's very different. And just a little bit of backstory is we met in high school. So we have a long history. And when he called the doctor that Black Friday and insisted that I get in, I'm alive today because he did that. And I know that because my doctor told me that I was about to die that day. And I later learned I was at 6%. And I later saw a chart that said these different levels of what they call EF, and 5% says not compatible with life.
Wow.
And I just thought I wasn't feeling well. And I don't know that I would have gone in on my own. My kids were home. I wanted to be with them. I may have put it off. But the other thing that's significant is our relationship really did take a turn that day, because he started, I'm a mom, you raise kids, you're the caretaker. And then on a dime, he became the caretaker. And that has been just such a different level of, he takes care of all the mundane tasks at home. He does everything. And that has just brought him up so many notches in my mind from where he already was, and has been such a blessing to me, because I know that doesn't happen for everyone. Sometimes life turns like that, and it doesn't end up that way. But I've been really blessed to have him in my corner. And not just with the physical tasks and the help. Something he told me in ICU early on, and I have to tell you, I didn't receive it well when he said it, but he said, it's okay. He said he's a runner, and he had not run for a week because I was in ICU. And finally, a friend came in and said, I'll stay with her if you want to go on a run. And so he did. He left the hospital for the first time, went on a run, went home, took a shower, came back. And he said to me, I finally got some time to think. And I realize now that everything's going to be okay, even if you don't get better. And I'm waiting for what he's going to say next. And he says, because we're just trading what we can't keep for something we can never lose. And I didn't understand at that time. I was kind of mad at him for the first part of the statement for a while, because I was like, you were running and I was here hooked up to all these machines and you can't give up on me yet. But he was right, because, I might have been completely healed that day or that week when I was in ICU, or the second week, but it would only be temporary, because 30, 40 years, I'm going to die for sure. Yeah. We know how this ends.
Yeah.
And what he was saying is we're trading that for something so much bigger and better. And so he's been such a proponent of the bigger picture all along, even when I couldn't see it and I was just narrowed in on medications and side effects and all the little things. He was always looking at the big picture and always thinking about what this means overall, and keeping, the kids not only informed, but keeping them calm and keeping them hopeful. And that's a big job.
It's amazing. Now, one thing you mentioned at the beginning too is that there's an audiobook version of this that's out. I know my wife and I love audiobooks. Tell us a little bit about having your book put to audio and what that means for you as an author.
Yes. So the book is called Divine Detour. And like I said, it's 40 essays divided between those 3 life questions. But I had always hoped to have it in audio because I lost my parents in 2020, but my mother had gotten to a point with her eyesight where she couldn't read anymore. And my dad was printing everything out in huge fonts. He would print out my articles for her, and I'd go see him, and there'd be these huge fonts of my articles. But she was just starting to get into audiobooks when she suddenly passed away. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was to put this in audio. And I just had this idea that I wanted to read it myself. I didn't know if that was a cool thing or if that was a bad idea, but I just wanted to do it. And so, I talked to my publisher and they said, yeah, go for it. If you want to read it, you go for it. And so I found a recording studio here locally that does different recordings, but had done several audiobooks, and they were great to work with. And I just dove in and read it. And I'm really glad that I did now. I was afraid at first that it might, be distracting for people if I have an accent or if I'm not a professional narrator, but I think it really lends to some of the authenticity of it. And the people that have listened to it have been very supportive of hearing it through my voice, because, I lived it. So yeah. I put different inflections than other people might.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm definitely going to have links to everything in the show notes. But for those that can't read for whatever reason, that audiobook is such a great resource to let people in and let them have a moment and to hear it from the author's voice. There's just something special about that as a listener, to know that it's your voice and your words. But what I find interesting, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, this was a journal that was meant for the burn pile. This was never meant to go anywhere. Yeah. And here you are reading it to us. Yeah. That was not the original plan. Was that hard for you to start reading through this and reliving the sights, the sounds, the memories as you read this for us?
I think my biggest emotion in reading it, and it's funny because I wrote it in 2020 and 2021, and then it didn't come out as a book until 2023. So it had been a while since I had actually read my book cover to cover when I read the audiobook. And I was like you, I thought, ooh, this could be hard. It could be really painful to go back. But the emotion that I got more than anything was just this overwhelming gratitude that, none of the doctors thought I'd be here today. None of them. And, all the support that I had and all of, the words that people were letting me borrow and my family. And I think as humans, we sometimes forget until we go back and read or remember to be grateful. And so to me, it was really an exercise in, wow, I have a lot to be grateful for. And if I didn't read it again from cover to cover out loud, I might have not done that. I might have forgotten about it for a while.
It's amazing. For those listening and they want to know more about you, I was on your website and following along on that part of your journey. Tell us, as far as connection-wise, all of that information. And then after that, I have one more question for you before we let you go. But let everybody know where they can connect with you and find out more about the next chapter. Again, here I go again, the next chapter of what's coming for you.
Yes. So my website is just loriannwood.com. And if anyone would be interested in a resource that I have that I developed during that silent period I was having with God, there's a 5 prayers and promises when you can't talk to God. That's loriannwood.com/hope.
Okay.
And you can also go to loriannwood.com/books. And there's a book trailer. There's you can read the first chapter of the book free and just see if it's for you or not. And lots of other information, links to where you can purchase the book. Of course, it's on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, all those places. But it's and on any of the social medias, I think I'm Lori Ann Wood on pretty much all of those. But
okay.
But I think if people are feeling like they're on some sort of a detour, it helps to know that you're not walking that rough road by yourself. So if nothing else, it's not something that's going to solve every problem that you have, but it's going to give you some companionship. It's going to give you some permission to ask some questions and be real. And I think that's the value in it, is just giving that detour a chance to turn positive for you. The subtitle of the book is "The Path You'd Never Choose Can Lead to the Faith You've Always Wanted," because nobody chooses a detour. And it can become something more than what it looks like if you give it a chance.
Wow. Okay, so before we go, I would love for you to speak directly to the authors that are listening. They're in the process of writing. They're struggling maybe a little bit with getting their words onto paper or onto that screen, and they just need a little motivation from a published author who's done it and is now on this side of it, and what you can do to encourage them as a new author in their journey. What would you like to say to them if you had an opportunity to sit with them and encourage them in their writing?
I think one of the biggest mistakes I mentioned early on, was that I was waiting to be an expert in something. And I think if you have an idea that's on your heart, then it needs to be written. And however you start that, if you start it in a journal, or you start a blog, or you start sharing it on Instagram, or however you want to do that, just start. Because if I had waited until I had all the training and all the knowledge and all the tools, I might never have gotten the book finished. So the key, I think, and it was very counter to my personality, was just to start and just do it. And that has been probably the biggest thing for me. And just to know that you're going to feel inadequate at every step. And if you're somebody that fights against that, just know that that's part of the process, is feeling like you don't know what you're doing. And that doesn't mean that you don't. It just means that it's a new adventure that you haven't done before, but you have something to say. If it's on your heart, you have something to say.
Nice. I love it. Everyone, loriannwood.com is the website. You want to go there and you want to definitely buy the book. I would suggest as well to gift the book to someone who maybe is living this part of their life and they need that kind of support right now. It'd be great to have that show up in someone's hands, and I would appreciate if you did that as well. And encourage everyone listening, when you do buy books from great authors, to leave them a review. Let them know what the book means to them. Let's go beyond the basics of great book, great author. Let's get some detail in there and tell these authors why this book really resonates with us as readers and as listeners now as well, and support our authors by giving them that feedback. So wherever you buy your books, make sure you do that, and maybe share this episode with somebody who could really need some encouragement. Lorianne, thank you for making time to be here to share your story. And again, to your community that has surrounded you with love, thank you for supporting Lorianne on this journey and being there for her and her family.
Yes.
It's amazing. Thank you for doing this today.
Thank you.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show, and if you're listening this far, thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com, and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow, helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.